when she said those words to me. Her eyes steady, voice calm, like she was confessing a sin she didn't regret. I swear the world stopped moving for a moment. The air between us turned heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. Not quite hate, not quite heartbreak. Maybe both, maybe more. That was the day I realized betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes, it comes in a whisper. From the lips of the person who once held your secrets, who knew your laugh, your fears, your husband's favorite meal. But before that moment, before everything fell apart, there was peace, or at least, I thought there was. My name is Nadia, and I've always been the steady one, the kind of woman who shows up early, remembers birthdays, and believes that love, once built on trust, can withstand anything. I married Rafiq 7 years ago. A quiet man, dependable, the kind you don't think twice about. We weren't a fairy tale couple, but we were real. Bills, routines, comfort, all the things love eventually becomes when you grow out of butterflies and into responsibility. And then there was my best friend, Sarah. Sarah had been my other half long before Rafiq came into the picture. We met in college. She was loud, funny, the kind of woman who could make a room notice her without even trying. I was the opposite, soft-spoken, the listener. We balanced each other out. When I got married, she stood beside me in a peach soiree, fixing my veil, whispering jokes to calm my nerves. I remember her saying, "If he ever hurts you, I'll make him regret it." Funny how words age like irony. Rafiq liked her instantly. Everyone did. She was charming, too charming maybe. She'd stop by often after work, always bringing small gifts. A new candle, a recipe she wanted to try, a pair of earrings she thought looked just like me. Sometimes, the three of us would sit in the living room, Rafiq talking about his office, Sarah teasing him about his serious face, and me smiling, feeling lucky that the two people I loved most in the world got along so well. If only I knew what that laughter was building toward. Life went on like that for years. Quiet dinners, inside jokes, birthdays spent together. When Rafiq got promoted, Sarah was the first to congratulate him. When she went through a bad breakup, Rafiq and I took her out for dinner to cheer her up. I thought it was friendship, the kind of sisterhood that survives everything. But love, I've learned, sometimes hides in plain sight, disguised as comfort. The first clue, suspicion. It started small, as it always does. Rafiq began staying late at work. Not unusual, since his company had taken on new projects. But there was something different in the way he came home. Quieter, distracted. I'd find him staring at his phone, smiling faintly, then quickly locking it when I walked into the room. I told myself not to overthink. We were married after all. Trust was our foundation, but one night, while he was in the shower, I heard his phone buzz on the nightstand. Normally I wouldn't look, but the screen lit up and her name appeared. Sarah? I froze. My first thought wasn't even suspicion. It was confusion. Why was she messaging him this late? Midnight conversations weren't her thing. She was the kind of friend who sent long voice notes about work gossip, but never to my husband. I told myself it was probably about some event or gift. Still, something in my chest tightened. When he came out, I asked casually, "Sarah messaged you?" He barely looked up. "Yes, she was asking about that project her company pitched to mine last week." His tone was smooth. Too smooth. I nodded. "She could have texted me," he shrugged, drying his hair. "You were asleep." I smiled, pretending I believed him. Maybe I wanted to. The next few weeks, I noticed other things. Her visits became rarer, but her name came up more. Rafiq mentioned her in passing. Small things, like Sarah told me about this great restaurant, or Sarah said that new Netflix show is good. I wondered when she had become his source for recommendations. And then there was the scent. Faint, familiar. Once, when I was folding his office shirt, I caught a trace of her perfume. Not strong, just a whisper. But I knew it instantly. It was velvet rose. The one she'd worn for years. The one I'd gifted her on her birthday. My fingers trembled as I held that shirt, the fabric soft, but suddenly unbearable in my hands. I wanted to scream, but all I did was fold it neatly and place it back in the drawer, because that's what women like me do. We fold our pain, press it flat, pretend it's part of the routine. Still, my mind refused to rest. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe she visited his office. Maybe it was coincidence. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "You already know the truth." It wasn't a dramatic confrontation that revealed everything. No lipstick on collars or scandalous photos. Just an unexpected silence. The kind that comes when the person you love stops pretending. One evening, I came home early from visiting my mother. The house was dim, the air heavy with rain. I heard laughter from the living room. Rafik's low voice, followed by a softer one. My steps slowed. When I turned the corner, I saw them. Sarah sat on the sofa, her legs tucked under her, her hand on his arm. They were close, too close. Not lovers caught in passion, but something quieter, familiar, intimate in a way words can't capture. They didn't notice me at first. Rafik was smiling. A real smile. One I hadn't seen in months. And then Sarah said something that made them both laugh. My stomach dropped. I stepped forward. Am I interrupting something? The silence that followed was deafening. Rafik stood up too fast, his expression changing from joy to guilt in a split second. Sarah turned, her face pale. "Nadia, I was just what?" I asked softly. "Laughing with my husband." No one spoke. The rain outside grew louder, like it was trying to fill the silence for us. I looked at her. My friend, my sister, in everything but blood, and saw something flicker in her eyes. Pity maybe, or shame. I couldn't tell. "I think you should go," I said finally. She opened her mouth to say something, but Rafik stepped between us. "Nadia, please, don't make this what?" I whispered. "Real." My voice cracked then, not from anger, but from the kind of exhaustion that comes when love collapses under its own weight. Sarah left quietly. Rafik didn't follow, not that night. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands in his hair, while I stood by the window, watching the rain. No one said the words, but they hung in the air, unspoken and heavy. It's over. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the ceiling fan, every flash of lightning through the window, felt like an accusation. I lay beside him, the man who had promised to protect my heart, while he stared at the ceiling, lost in thoughts I no longer shared. The silence between us was louder than any argument. The next morning, I woke up early, partly to avoid him, partly because my chest felt too heavy to stay still. I brewed coffee the way he liked, out of habit, and when he walked into the kitchen, he looked startled, like he hadn't expected normalcy. He opened his mouth, but I stopped him. "Don't," I said softly. "Not yet." He sat down, shoulders slumped, and for the first time in years, I realized I didn't know this man. The quiet worker I married had been replaced by someone I couldn't read anymore. "I didn't mean for you to find out like that," he said finally. "Find out what, Rafik?" I asked. "That you're in love with my best friend, or that I've been living in a lie I helped build." He flinched at that, eyes darting to the window. It wasn't planned, it just happened. I laughed. The sound came out broken. That's what people say when they bump into someone at the supermarket, not when they betray their wife. He didn't argue. Maybe because there was no defense strong enough to make what he did sound human. I didn't tell anyone at first. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner. Mechanical, precise. It was like living inside a photograph of my life. where everything looked the same, but nothing felt real. And then Sarah texted me, "We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "No, we don't," but she came anyway, standing at my doorstep in her neat blazer, hair tied back, looking every bit the woman who had once been my sister. She stepped inside, uninvited. "Nadia, I didn't want it to happen this way," she began. I crossed my arms. "What way would have been better, Sarah? You sneaking him out in daylight instead of at night?" She sighed, placing her purse down like she was preparing for a meeting. "You and Rafiq, you'd grown apart. I saw how lonely he was." I stared at her in disbelief. "You saw how lonely he was? You were my friend, Sarah. If you saw anything, it should have been me." Her eyes softened. Pity, not guilt. "You're strong, Nadia. You always have been. He needed someone different." That was when it clicked. She didn't come to apologize. She came to justify. "You know," I said slowly, "I used to tell people you were like my sister. Now I realize even sisters can be snakes." She winced, but still didn't leave. "I wanted to tell you sooner, but you wanted to make sure I was too broken to fight back." I interrupted. Her silence was answer enough. When she finally walked away, I felt something inside me shatter, but not entirely. There was a sliver left that burned with anger, not despair. A small, stubborn piece of me that whispered, "You will not be their victim." Days turned into weeks. Rafiq moved out quietly. No drama, no explanation to the neighbors. I let him go, not because I forgave him, but because I was done carrying both his guilt and mine. But then the news came. Sarah and Rafiq were getting married. It had been barely 3 months since the night I found them together, when I saw the wedding announcement on social media. Her in white, his hand around her waist. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My heart didn't break this time. It turned to stone. They looked radiant. The comments were full of congratulations. And "You two look perfect together." I wanted to scream at the screen, tell the world what really happened. But instead, I smiled, because that was the moment I decided how I would take my power back. I didn't need revenge. I needed truth. I gathered every message, every photo, every trace of our shared history. And I wrote, not to expose them, but to cleanse myself. I wrote about friendship, about trust, about how betrayal doesn't start with lies. It starts with comfort that crosses a line too many times. I didn't name them. I didn't need to. The people who mattered knew. My story spread quietly among friends and co-workers. People guessed, whispered, connected dots. And as the gossip reached them, I knew they were finally tasting the discomfort I'd swallowed for months. But that wasn't the real satisfaction. The real satisfaction came from the calm that followed. One afternoon, months after their wedding, I ran into them at a restaurant. They looked different. Not the glowing couple from the pictures. She had shadows under her eyes. He looked older, tired. Sarah smiled first, too brightly. "Nadia, it's been ages." I returned the smile. "Yes, it has. Marriage suits you." Her lips twitched. "It's complicated." I raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it always?" For a moment, her confidence cracked. Rafiq avoided my eyes. I could have said 100 things then. Sharp, cruel things that would have hurt. But I didn't, because the truth was, they were already living their punishment. You see, betrayal doesn't just destroy trust. It poisons comfort. They could never relax around each other again, not really. After all, if you steal someone's love, you'll always fear someone stealing it from you. I paid my bill and stood up to leave. Sarah reached out. "Nadia, can we ever—" "No," I said gently, pulling my hand back. "Some things aren't meant to heal. They're meant to end." And I walked away, lighter than I had in months. People talk, no matter how much you try to stay silent. The story of Rafiq and Sarah didn't stay polished for long. Whispers turned into rumors, and soon, The truth began to leak. Little pieces, through mutual friends, through colleagues who'd seen too much. It started when Rafiq's company transferred him to another branch. Someone had tipped off HR about improper relationships during project work. No one could prove who leaked it, but I didn't have to. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled in her new role. The same colleagues who once admired her now avoided her. Because betrayal, once known, has a way of sticking to your name. Still, I never gloated. I never said they deserved it. Because maybe, on some level, I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted peace. And peace doesn't come from watching others fall. It comes from learning to stand on your own again. And I did. I didn't have to lift a finger. The world did the unraveling for me. Because that's what happens when people build happiness on someone else's heartbreak. The cracks eventually show. It started with whispers at Sarah's workplace. One of her colleagues, an old classmate of mine, told me months later how she overheard Sarah crying in the break room, saying, "I thought he'd change for me." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Then came the social shift. The way their once bright wedding photos lost likes. The way mutual friends quietly unfollowed them. People don't always voice their judgments. Sometimes they just stop looking. I didn't enjoy it. That's the truth. There was no thrill in watching them crumble, only a quiet sadness. Betrayal changes everyone involved. Even the one betrayed. You start seeing people differently, hearing lies in ordinary words. But you also learn that silence can be its own kind of power. I poured that power into rebuilding myself. For a long time, I avoided mirrors. I didn't like seeing the woman who'd been fooled, the one who smiled beside a man who was already slipping away. But healing isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about learning to live with the truth. I started with small things. Morning walks, a new job at a small interior design firm, a new apartment with soft yellow curtains and a balcony full of plants. For the first time in years, the quiet in my home was peaceful, not lonely. I could hear myself think again. I began sketching again too, something I hadn't done since college. My hands would tremble at first, but over time, the lines grew steadier, more confident. It felt symbolic, like drawing my way out of the ruins. One day I got a letter, handwritten, the ink smudged in a few places. It was from Rafiq. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." It began, "Sarah and I aren't together anymore. It didn't work. I think about you often. Not because I want you back, but because I finally understand what I destroyed." I read it twice, not because I cared, but because a part of me wanted closure. That final acknowledgement of the wound he caused. He ended with, "You were never the practice. You were the person I should have learned to love properly." I folded the letter and tucked it in a drawer. I didn't cry, not even once. Maybe that's what true healing looks like. When the words that once could have broken, you barely leave a mark. Months later, Sarah reached out too. A short text this time. "Can we meet? Please. I need to explain." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to delete it and move on. But another part, the one that still believed closure mattered, said yes. We met at a quiet cafe near the lake. She looked smaller somehow, like life had worn her down. Her eyes darted around nervously before she finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Nadia. Truly. I thought what I had with him, was real. But it wasn't. I see that now." I listened silently. "I ruined the best friendship I ever had," she continued, voice cracking. "And for what? A man who lied to both of us." I sipped my tea, the steam fogging my glasses. "You didn't ruin it for him, Sarah," I said quietly. "You ruined it for yourself." Her tears fell, soft and unguarded. "Can you ever forgive me?" I took a breath. The old me might have said no out of pride. But the woman sitting there, the one who'd survived the storm, chose differently. "I forgive you," I said. "But that doesn't mean we'll ever be what we were. Some bridges are better left burned." They light the way forward. Her shoulders shook, and for a moment, I almost pitied her. But pity isn't love, and forgiveness isn't return. When I left that cafe, I didn't look back. The next year was quiet, almost beautifully so. I focused on myself, my career, my peace. My designs began getting noticed. I was invited to collaborate on a community project, turning an old library into a learning center for women rebuilding after divorce. Funny how life circles back. Helping others rebuild became my own redemption. Every story I heard there, every woman who shared how she'd been abandoned, cheated on, or dismissed, reminded me I wasn't alone. Heartbreak is universal, but so is resilience. One evening, as I walked home past the renovated library, I saw the reflection of the building's warm lights on the pavement and realized something profound. The woman I'd become was born from the ashes of everything I'd lost. Rafiq and Sarah were distant memories now, ghosts that no longer haunted me. And that's when I understood. Revenge fades, but growth doesn't. Healing isn't a straight road, it's a spiral. You keep coming back to the same pain, but each time, it hurts less. A few months ago, I attended a friend's wedding. As the bride walked down the aisle, I caught myself smiling, not with envy, but with calm acceptance. I knew now that love isn't about permanence, it's about presence. The love I gave wasn't wasted. It simply found its lesson elsewhere. When someone asked if I'd ever remarry, I laughed softly. Maybe, I said, but not because I need someone to complete me. Only if they can walk beside me without cutting my shadow. That night, I stood by the window of my apartment, the city humming below, the air thick with possibility. I realized I wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. I was exactly where I needed to be, whole, free, and finally at peace. Sometimes I think back to that moment, standing across from Sarah, hearing her say those words, "You are just the practice." For a long time, I thought that sentence defined me, that I was something temporary, a lesson for someone else's forever. But I know now, she was wrong, because being the practice doesn't mean you failed. It means you tried. You gave love honestly, you trusted deeply, and you walked through heartbreak with dignity instead of hate. And maybe that's the quiet victory no one sees. The ability to walk away without bitterness. Life taught me that betrayal doesn't always come to break you. Sometimes it comes to build the version of you that no longer settles for half-truths. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't for the person who hurt you. It's for your own peace, so you can finally breathe again. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, a friend, a partner, maybe both, I hope you remember this. You are not the foolish one for loving. They are the broken ones for taking love and turning it into deceit. So, when I look at my reflection now, I don't see a woman who lost everything. I see a woman who learned how to start again.